Another Detroit Pistons miss and another Detroit Pistons could have been. Tyrese Haliburton speaks on the possibility of him getting drafted by the Detroit Pistons a few years ago in 2020. We'll talk about that and our thoughts on what he had to say in today's episode of the Locked On Pistons podcast.
You are Locked On Pistons, your daily Detroit Pistons podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's the deal? Welcome back to another episode of the Locked On Pistons podcast. Per usual, I'm your host, Kuka Hill. You can find me over on Twitter at Kuka Hill. I want to thank you guys for making Locked On Pistons your first listen of every single day. We are free and available on all your podcast platforms. If you haven't already, head to the YouTube channel at Locked On Pistons. Hit that subscribe button or leave us a 5-star review on whatever podcast platform you're listening to this on. There's another great way to support the podcast. And today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any $5 winning bet. That's $150 if your bet wins. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started today. I'm tiptoeing in very dangerous waters here. And, I debated about whether talking about this or not, but it's All-Star break still, and there hasn't been much going on. And this is probably the talk of the town right now in the Pistons community. We're going to talk about Tyrese Haliburton's comments over the week about the Pistons passing him up. We'll go later on. We'll talk about Monty and Troy Weaver. Are they on the clock? And then also a certain somebody in the NBA that has the chance to do the funniest thing possible and really hurt the Pistons. We'll talk about that a little later as well. But obviously first, let's talk about Tyrese Haliburton. And I'm sure a lot of Pistons fans, actually not a lot, I'm sure 99.99999% of Pistons fans wish that the reason why I would be talking about Tyrese Haliburton on this podcast is because the Detroit Pistons drafted him at number 7 in 2020. And as we all know, that is not how it turned out. The Pistons passed up on him, Killian Hayes, and Tyrese Haliburton slid on a few more spots down to 12 to go to the the Sacramento Kings, I'm sorry. So Haliburton over the week, he made the All-Star game, obviously. It was in Indiana. And he was being interviewed, and he was asked about the 2020 draft and asked about, being passed up on by all these teams. And he talked about how he told certain teams he didn't want to go there and not to draft them, and he didn't want to go to a team with a point guard already and all that stuff. But he said when the Pistons were coming up, he knew that they needed a point guard. And he thought for sure that he was going to Detroit. And that when the name Killian Hayes came up on the screen, he said, quote, "What?" and was completely shocked. And he said that he thought he took it personally that they did not draft him over Killian Hayes. Now, 4 years later, it's quite obvious that the Detroit Pistons took a really, really bad swing and really missed on that pick. What I will say for the Pistons, and it's something that you can say for every draft, really. The draft, some people don't like hearing this, but the draft is a crapshoot. There's a lot of misses and there's a lot of hits. Now, I know some people feel like, well, the draft's not a crapshoot if you do your homework. I feel like you could do your homework and still miss. Some guys are great prospects and don't become great players. Like, there's so many things that happen that help a player develop, that causes a player to go from just a really good prospect to really a good player that we don't see, that none of us will ever get to see or find out about. A lot of that happens behind closed doors. A lot of that happens in areas where the public doesn't get to find out or see. So there's a lot of stuff that happens, and your homework could be great. Your homework, you could do a great job with your pre-draft process, and sometimes it doesn't work out. And that's one of the main things with this last 2 years, the last 2 years being the first 2 years I really have gotten into draft stuff, talking to a bunch of people who do this, do scouting and do draft stuff as part of their careers. One of the main things I get told repeatedly is that, look, you're going to have misses. People are going to miss. GMs are going to miss. People are going to miss. Like, it's going to happen. What you want to make sure happens is that you feel comfortable with your pre-draft process. If you feel like you went through the process correctly and the way you analyze these prospects, if you feel like you did it in the best way possible, however the chips lay, It is what it is. Whatever ends up happening, a lot of it's out of your control. As long as you feel like you did the right process, it is what it is. So I say that to say this. Looking back at it now, it's very easy to say that Tyrese Haliburton should have been a pick. And I know there's a few people out there in the Pistons community who did want Tyrese Haliburton to be the pick at the time. And for those people, you can take victory laps all you want. 100%. I know I would. If I picked a guy, if I wanted the Pistons to draft a guy and they didn't, and that guy I wanted them to draft turned out to be a monster, I 100% would be taking victory laps. So for those of you out there who did want Haliburton at the time, you 100% should be taking victory laps. However, that's not how it went. People are lying about how this went. Killian Hayes at the time of that draft was by far the Pistons' darling. Pistons fans wanted him. I'm happy that Amari Sankofa of the Detroit Free Press tweeted out this saying, hey man, some of y'all are lying on here. And he tweeted out a poll from back in 2020. And it was a poll asking, hey, the Pistons on the board, they're taking a point guard, LaMelo's gone. Who is your pick? And it has Tyrese Haliburton, Killian Hayes, and Kira Lewis on this poll. 70% of Pistons fans picked Killian Hayes. At the time of the draft, Killian Hayes was a highly thought of prospect. Everyone knows that he was number 1 in the Ringer mock draft, which obviously is a huge miss. But even on other, I screenshotted the NBA.com's mock draft, and they had Killian Hayes going 7 to the Pistons, and then they had other places that had him going in the top 7. And there was about 4 or 5 other places as well, well-respected places that had him going in the top 7. I say all that to say this. Tyrese Haliburton obviously was the right pick. And this is going to be, when we get into the second segment, this miss of a pick may end up dooming Troy Weaver's time with the Pistons. Now, I think Troy Weaver has done other things that is going to doom his time with the Pistons. But I think if he were to get fired this offseason or were to get fired next year, I think a lot of Pistons fans will trace it all the way back to this. And I think that definitely plays a part. When your first draft and you're supposed to be a scouting, a great scout, when your first draft, you pass up on somebody at the same position and the guy you draft ends up getting waived, and the guy you passed up on ends up being a possible face of the NBA. Like that's a pretty crazy turn of events. I feel like even if Killian had turned out to be just like an okay starter, he probably would get a little bit of a pass with it. The fact that Killian ended up being like literally the worst possible outcome at his floor ceiling, like that it just makes it even worse in that department. So I think it 100% may doom Weaver. I'm not defending Weaver at all. It's his job to hit these picks, and he missed. You could argue 11 other teams missed, maybe 10 or 9 because, Ant-Man and LaMelo. But you could say 9 other teams missed as well on Tyrese Haliburton. All I wanted to point out, and the only thing I wanted to say is I feel like a lot of people are lying. A lot of people are having revisionist history and trying to take victory laps when they shouldn't be taking victory laps. Because at the time of 2020, at the time of that draft, almost every Pistons fan I interacted with wanted Killian Hayes. A large majority, I'd say, of the Pistons fan base wanted Killian Hayes. And whether that was because they already had Sekou, so they wanted to do the little French Revolution thing that was going on, whatever it may be, at the time of the draft, not only was Killian a highly thought of prospect, a lot of Pistons fans liked him. So it didn't work out. It was unfortunate. It was a really bad miss by Troy Weaver, and it may end up dooming his job. At the end of the day, it may end up dooming his job. All that may be true, but people are definitely lying and capping about what it was, like what was going on at the time of that draft and who people wanted. Again, like I said, if you were one of the people who wanted Haliburton at the time, you should be taking your victory laps to the end of time. Take your victory lap. That was a big hit for you. You were absolutely on point. Take your victory laps. Talk all the trash you want. But that should only be like maybe 20% of the Pistons fan base, because like almost everyone I communicated with at the time of 2020, and I wasn't even one of them. That was before I got into the draft stuff. I didn't know anything really about Killian Hayes that much, like really at all, outside of Pistons fans telling me how much they loved him. So look, people miss, bro. Like people miss. The bad part is that it was such a bad miss, and the guy you missed on was such a big hit. And I think what even makes it worse is that it was the Pistons who did it, who have had a 10-year history of doing this exact same thing over and over. Whether it's Luke Kennard and Donovan Mitchell, Stanley Johnson, Devin Booker. You got what was the Kawhi draft? That was the same. Kawhi and PG were the same draft, right? I think that was the draft they took. I want to say Monroe. Was that one, or was that KCP or Monroe? I think it was one of those. But either way, the Pistons have a 10-year history of doing this, which what makes it even worse. So it definitely sucks. It sucks 100%. And it's going to hurt every time Haliburton talks about this, because he's talked about this now probably like 5 times in the last year. He's brought up the fact that he thought the Pistons were going to draft him. So each time he brings it up, it's going to hurt, because if he was on the Pistons, a lot of things over the last few years would be obviously different. Like, he is a absolutely elite talent, and having him on the team would have changed some things, would have changed the outlook of this team. But that's not what happened. This is a big miss by Weaver. It's going to be something he has to live down. Some of the Pistons organization are going to have to live down. And it is what it is, man. Like, you got to just move forward. You got to move. You can't sulk in the past. You got to move forward. Like I said, for those of you guys who want Haliburton, take your victory laps. But everyone trying to act like that was the obvious pick at the time, that's just not true. That's just not the case at all. It was not the case. But I mean, an easy argument could be is that Troy Weaver is the one who gets paid to make these decisions, so therefore he gets held to the fire, whereas Pistons fans don't. They don't get paid to do so, which is, I can't really argue with that. But either way, let me know how you guys feel about Haliburton's comments on the Detroit Pistons passing up on them. I know I really, especially coming from me, I completely get why coming from me is probably like ironic, because I was the Killian guy for a minute, for a while. So I get why that it could be ironic, but I mean, it is what it is. At a certain point, you got to face the truth. You feel me? So let me know what you guys feel about Haliburton and what he said about the Detroit Pistons. Did you feel like at the time of the draft it was obvious pick for Tyrese Haliburton? Were you one of the people who wanted Haliburton? Let me know all that in the comment section down below, or over on Twitter at Kuka Hill. Is Monty Williams and Troy Weaver on the clock right now? And when I say on the clock, I mean fighting for their jobs. We'll talk about that coming up. But before we get into any of that, got to tell you guys a little bit about one of our sponsors, FanDuel. Get buckets with your first bet on FanDuel, America's #1 sports book, because right now new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 if your bet wins. Again, $150 if your bet wins. Bet on all your favorite NBA players and teams with quick bets, live same-game parlays, exclusive props, and more. Like I've told you guys many times, a few years ago when betting became legal in Michigan, I didn't know where to go. I wasn't advanced in it. I didn't know anything about it. I picked FanDuel, tried it out, and I haven't turned back since. I still use it to this day. Incredibly fun, incredibly easy to use, self-explanatory. You will absolutely love it. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and shoot your shot. And again, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. Again, that's FanDuel.com/lockedon and shoot your shot. That's what FanDuel, the official partner of the NBA. Now I got to tell you guys about another one of our sponsors, LinkedIn Jobs. When you're hiring for your small business, you want to find quality professionals that are right for the role. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs has the tools to help to find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. LinkedIn isn't just another job board. LinkedIn has a vast network of more than 1 billion professionals, which makes it the best place to hire. It gives you access to professionals you can't find anywhere else. LinkedIn does all that while making the process easy and intuitive. Hiring is easy when you have that many quality candidates. So easy, in fact, that 86% of small businesses get a quality candidate within 24 hours. LinkedIn knows that small businesses are wearing so many hats and might not have the time or resources to hire. LinkedIn is constantly finding ways to make the process easier. They even just launched a feature that helps you write your job descriptions, making the process even easier and quicker. 2.5 million small businesses use LinkedIn for hiring, and they do not regret it. Post your job for free at LinkedIn.com/LockedOnNBA. That's LinkedIn.com/LockedOnNBA to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply at LinkedIn Jobs. Again, that's LinkedIn.com/LockedOnNBA to post your job for free. So I want to thank you guys again for making Locked On Pistons your first listen of every single day. Free and available on all your podcast platforms. If you haven't already, head to the YouTube channel at Locked On Pistons. Hit that subscribe button or leave us a 5-star review on whatever podcast platform you're listening to this on. That's another great way to support the podcast. I feel like this might be a question where when I ask this question to you guys, you all probably like, what the hell kind of question this is, obviously. But here's what it is. Is Monty Williams and Troy Weaver on the clock? And when I say, are they on the clock, I don't mean like with Pistons fans, because they've obviously been on the clock since November, like with Pistons fans. Like if it was up to Pistons fans, Weaver would have been fired in November, and Monty may have been fired before that. So I know that Pistons fans have them on their own hot seat. My question is, are they actually on the hot seat or on the clock with Tom Gores? And my answer to that, if I had to, based off everything we've seen and based off everything we've heard and what they've said and the reports and what's been leaked out, all of that, if I had to take a guess, I would have to say that their seat is probably not as hot as you guys want it to be. And maybe, actually, the better wording would be their seat probably isn't as hot as it should be for a team that has been as bad as the Pistons were this year and dug themselves a type of hole that we have never seen in NBA history. Damn near broke the losing streak record, tied it. And at this point, in the beginning of February, had only played their core 4 guys together around 100 minutes. Like, there are so many different ways and so many different avenues you can go down to talk about how bad the season has been for so many different reasons. So I think that they should be on the clock 100%. And I think they should be on the hot seat. And quite honestly, I think there's a very, very strong argument for them had already lost their jobs. But they haven't. And they still have their jobs. And Weaver just had a very aggressive trade deadline. He spoke to the media afterwards. And usually, for a GM that's a sitting duck, you don't allow him to go then trade 8 players and completely replenish the roster. So that tells me that Weaver is not on the hot seat. He would have to do something absolutely insane outside of basketball, damn near at that point, to get fired, I think. Troy Weaver, that is. Monty Williams, though, that's where I'm going to pivot to, because I do think Troy Weaver is safe at least until next year, based off how the trade deadline had went. I think the Pistons could lose the next 20 games and he still would have his job. That's just what it seems like at this point with the Pistons. But Monty Williams, though, I'll say this. Monty Williams could be fired at the end of this year. That's what I think, and that's what I hope. Not hope that he loses his job. I'm not going to sit here and ever hope for someone to be unemployed and, even though he would be still collecting a check that no one else in this community would even dream of being able to see in their lifetime. So maybe I shouldn't care, or people shouldn't care. But either way, the point is, Monty Williams should be in the hot seat. And he should be evaluated as soon as the season ends. I mean, like the day that the season ends, like what does the NFL call it? Black Monday, I think is what it's called. Like as soon as the season ends, like all the coaches start getting fired and stuff. Everyone starts getting cut and stuff. The Pistons should have that. Like they should immediately, as soon as the horn goes and it's 0-0-0 on the final game of the year, immediately they should be analyzing and evaluating Monty Williams' job. And I'll say this. It's obvious that he did a terrible job until this point. So really, what I think they should be evaluating is, because before, like I said before, he had a bad hand. I think he did the worst job he possibly could have done with his bad hand. But nonetheless, he had a bad hand. So he had a little bit of a built-in excuse. I don't think he has that bad of a hand, like we've talked about on the podcast before, after the All-Star break. He has a decent team. Not saying they should be a playoff team, but they should not be the worst team in the NBA. They shouldn't be one of the worst teams in NBA history. Like, that can't happen. That should not be the case anymore. They should be much, much better. So from here on out, I'm recording this on February 20th. From here on out until the very last game of the season, if the Detroit Pistons are not playing, I'd say, near 500 basketball, he should be fired. He should be fired. If the Pistons are not playing in much better basketball than we had seen throughout this year, Monty Williams should be fired. I'm sorry for him on mic just now. He should be fired immediately. If throughout the rest of the year, the Detroit Pistons do not play their core four together and get more reps and get more minutes on the floor together, he should be fired at the end of the year. If they don't try to find ways, if they don't start to show that they were trying to find ways of using all of them together offensively in the half court, being more creative. We talked about it for a whole 13 minutes in the last episode. All the different strategies, all the different schemes, everything that JJ Redick broke down in his podcast about ways of using non-shooters together on the court, talking about how Quinn Snyder does it, talked about how Will Hardy does it, talked about how Willie Green does it. If this team doesn't show at least an effort, them trying an attempt at trying to do that with the core four, and specifically, obviously, the two non-shooters of Ausar and Duren, Monty should be let go at the end of the year. Like, Monty, these last 2 months should be an evaluation process for Monty Williams, because the Pistons are not in year one no more. They're not in year two, year three of this rebuild. They are in year four. They have an extension decision with Cade Cunningham coming up this offseason. They have another one with Ivy and Duren the following year. And honestly, next year is a make-or-break year for them. You could see major changes happen at the deadline next year if this team is not infinitely better. And if one of the main ways you can get infinitely better or see massive improvement with your team is to have the right coach for your team and have a scheme and have a message and have a culture that is being bought into by every player on the team that leads to success. So if you have that kind of mandate and you know you need those type of results immediately at this point of a rebuild, you cannot just walk into the next season saying, well, you know, we don't know with this guy, but we're going to give him another shot. We're just going to see what happens. No, you can't do that. You just can't. You just can't do it. Now, again, if things go well the rest of the year and they feel like at the end of the year, yeah, Monty showed that he deserves to have his job and he's figuring out this team, he's using them correctly, blah, 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 all that stuff, you absolutely keep him. He's on a big contract, and if he proves that he's doing a good job at that point with a better hand, then that's great for all parties. You don't have to swallow that big of a contract. You don't have to fire him. You don't have to go find a new coach. You don't have to integrate a new system and another offseason. Like, that would be the best case scenario. Obviously, that would be great. But if that doesn't happen, the Pistons should not hesitate to move on from Monty Williams this offseason. It is too important of a season coming up next year to go into the season with questions about your head coach. Because they're going to have questions about the young core because this current head coach didn't get enough reps out of them together this season. So you're going to go into next season with questions about your young core nonetheless. You can't also have questions about whether the coach is the right one for that young core. Again, 2 years in a row. You can't do it. You can't do it. So that's why I feel like. I think Weaver's probably completely safe no matter what at this point. But I think Monty Williams should be on the hot seat. He should be being evaluated literally every game from here on out. No joke. That's how bad this season was. So that's where I feel. And that's where I stand with it. Let me know what you guys think in the comment section down below or over on Twitter at Kuka Hill. When we come back, there is a certain person who was just elevated to being the head coach in the NBA that has the chance to do the funniest thing possible. And maybe not funniest to Pistons fans. It may hurt a lot, but in NBA circles, to do the funniest thing possible. We'll talk about who that is and what we're talking about when we come back. Passion, drive, and patience. What brings home the winning trophy is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance, from superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time, or you'll get your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to turn your car into the MVP and bring home that win. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. Again, keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. So I want to thank you guys again for making Locked On Pistons your first listen of every single day. Free and available on all your podcast platforms. If you haven't already, head to the YouTube channel at Locked On Pistons. Hit that subscribe button or leave us a 5-star review on whatever podcast platform you're listening to this on. That's another great way to support the podcast. I'm just thinking back to what we talked about in the first segment, and I wonder how many people are just like completely like pissed right now still that I addressed that. I'm kind of worried about the backlash that's going to come from this. But you know what's crazy? You know what's really crazy? Is that this season has the chance to get even worse for me. For me, not even just Pistons fans. No, it could get worse for Pistons fans. But for me, this may turn out to be, it has a chance for sure, at being maybe my worst season yet. I think I had a good season last year. I'm not going to lie to you. I think the year before that was pretty good on that season too. I think Cade's rookie season, his off season, I should say, the season drafting Cade, I thought I had a really good off season that year too. I had some things I missed. Obviously, everyone has some misses, but I thought overall, not gonna lie, I think I was pretty good. I was pretty on point with a lot of stuff. This season, though, we have the possibility of this being by far the worst season I've had, and I don't know if I'll be able to recover. I don't know if I'll be able to look myself in the mirror at the end of this year if this continues to happen. So let me just walk you guys through what I'm talking about here. So obviously, like we talked about in the first segment, obviously I was the Killian guy, right? Still held out belief for him that he would work out, be a good player at some point, and he was waived. Not traded. He was just let go. So that's strike one, right? That was strike one. And some would argue that's such a big miss and such a hill to die on that it might be worth 2 strikes in and of itself. So I understand that. So that's already making like this season like rough for me already. That already has me going in the wrong direction. You feel me? I feel like I was pretty on point with this team not being that good this year. Now I didn't expect them to be this bad for most of the season. So, but I was on the pessimistic view. So maybe I get a little tiny checkpoint for that. I did at the beginning of the year. I had some of you guys point out to me that when the Pistons lost the first like 4 or 5 games, I was like, they don't turn this around. They could go on like a 15, 16 game losing streak. And they ended up going on a 28 game one. So maybe I get a little brownie point with that. Okay, you guys may be wondering, why are you trying to give yourself checkpoints before? What's this big lead up you're getting to? Well, Kevin Ollie just got the head coaching job with the Brooklyn Nets. The Brooklyn Nets just fired Jacques Vaughn, and they have elevated Kevin Ollie to being their head coach. If you guys remember, in the offseason, I was probably actually Yeah, you know what? I'll go ahead and take the crown for that. I think there's an argument that there was a few other people that maybe were a little bit more loud than me, but I'll take the crown for it. I was probably the loudest person against going after Kevin Ollie. Someone who hadn't coached in the NBA in God knows how long, hadn't been a head coach in years upon years, and that goes back to UConn. And there was a lot of people who did not like how the UConn stuff went after the very initial success. And his only recent job experience with basketball was the OTE, being like the head of training development at OTE, a league that many of you and many people before the Pistons drafted Asar completely dismissed as a league and didn't take serious. And so much dismissed it that a lot of people didn't even want the Pistons to draft Asar simply because he went to OTE. Same thing with Ahmed. So, and with all of that, I was very loud saying that there is no way that with all the coaching candidates available and doing all your thorough research with all the candidates they interviewed, that the person they go with is that dude who also happened to have like friendship ties to Troy Weaver. It kind of smelled a little bit of favoritism. And where we were at in that offseason, I was like, look, the Pistons have a big season coming up. They should not be making their head coach of the future a guy that the GM's just friends with and that has no experience in the NBA, hasn't had head coaching experience in years. Like that's the flag I stood on. And if you want to be completely honest, I think that's a pretty damn good, reasonable flag to set on. right? Like that makes sense. Like that whole argument right there makes sense. But now he has a head coaching job with the Brooklyn Nets. And if Kevin Ollie goes out with the Brooklyn Nets, and he's already put out like some of the most inspirational quotes of all time. I already have some Pistons fans comparing him to Dan Campbell. His first interview, he dropped like 4 bombs. Like, I can't even lie to you. They were straight bars, like four straight bars from Kevin Ollie. He won the press conference. Okay. He won that. So if he takes that and then like does a great job with the Brooklyn Nets the rest of the year and actually is a good head coach for the Brooklyn Nets the rest of the year, where you see how bad Monty's been for the Pistons this year, you'd say, then the guy that Troy Weaver wanted is doing a good job in Brooklyn. The guy that I was heavily against is doing a good job in Brooklyn. And then the guy that they ended up going with is doing this bad of a job at the Detroit Pistons. Yeah, I think I probably would be like 3 strikes and you're out. And, I don't know if I'd be able to look myself in the mirror. So, Kevin Ollie has the chance to do the funniest thing possible to the Pistons, to Pistons fans, to the Piston players, to the Pistons organization, and especially to Kuka Hill. He has the chance to do the funniest thing possible. And we'll see if he does it. Obviously, I'm exaggerating a little bit here. Obviously, I'll be able to look myself in the mirror still. And, people miss. Like, if that happens to be the case, that's just going to be like this year. It's just going to be the year of Kuz misses. Like, that would be tough. It would be tough. But we'll see what happens. I'm definitely going to be tuned in. And it sounds like a lot of Pistons fans are going to be tuned in to how Brooklyn does. But this is certainly a turn of events. I don't think anybody, I'm not going to lie to you, I don't think anyone could have imagined that Monty would do this bad of a job with the Pistons this year. Like, I don't think even the most pessimistic person could have imagined that. Not going to lie. I think this is like next level. There's no way anyone saw this coming. But if this all backfires on me, I can't have the Killian Hayes thing and the Kevin Ollie thing happen within like it happened within 2 weeks of each other. Like, I can't have that both happen within 2 weeks of each other and both of them end up working out. I just have to take the L. I'd almost have to come on here and put clown makeup on. Like that's how rough it would get. No joke. That's how rough it would get. But it is what it is. You guys think that Kevin Ollie is going to do the funniest thing possible to the Detroit Pistons the rest of the year? Let me know what you guys think. Comment section down below or over on Twitter at Kuka Hill. That's all I've got for you guys today. Thank you guys for making Locked On Pistons your first listen of every single day. Free and available on all your podcast platforms. If you haven't already, head to the YouTube channel at Locked On Pistons. Hit that subscribe button. Until next time, I'll see you guys later. Stay safe out there. Until next time, peace out.